Madam President, members of the legislature, I've been listening to the debate, and this is one of those issues which is, as has been pointed out, very complicated, and things are going to have to settle before we will know exactly where we are. I heard somebody who sits near me who said he doesn't know much about water. Let me help him. Senator Mines, H2O. That's all you need to know. Now you know everything there is to know about water. I've watched some of my colleagues read their statements this morning, and I don't know whether they handed them out. I'm going to read something. Many years ago, I was reading an article about the origin of the Amazon River, and that led me to write something which I did pass out to my colleagues on the floor so they won't have the benefit of what I started out very small. Then as time goes on, they grow and sometimes become larger than anticipated. So while people are waiting, I call a tale of three rivers. Where they come from small beginnings. Successful gamblers start with minuscule winnings. Cloud-cloaked Andes, strange as starts as a modest stream. Then there's the longest river, torrent mile, from Kenya to Mediterranean, father of waters, the Nile. Somewhere in eastern Africa, the father's a toddling child. As it flows, it grows into that grand flood, long and wide. Flood here doesn't have any reference to our speaker, by the way. Sojourn to North America. What there does one see? Starting in Minnesota, the long, wide Mississippi, humble in its origin, humbler far than the rest. Pause and hear the story, nothing is offered in jest. In northern Minnesota, way, way, way up north, from a tiny trickle, the Mississippi bursts forth. In northern Minnesota remembers where it started. Up there, a poor old woman dwells in a poor old house. She is a poor old widow who bears a spouse. She has a leaking faucet. Long has its washer been gone, to which a hose she attaches, with which she waters her lawn. Slowly that carved a small groove in the ground, way to a gully close by the widow's house found. Deeper and deeper that gully grew, for it was not resistant to the eroding propensities of running water persistent. Out from that gully that water into a small stream did grow. Deeper and wider that stream grew as southward the water did go. Volume increased and waxed greater, till finally the widow's sliver swelled and swelled till it became the Mississippi River. Now this moral does not necessarily attach to what we're doing here today, but when you write rhymes, you want to leave people with a message, Senator Carlson. Giant things start as small ones. Nature's directing this show. Rivers emerge from small trickles. Huge oaks from small acorns grow. Learn from the story of rivers. Greatness attends those who wait. Starting out small's not important. What is ending up great. Now, we're starting out relatively small with this bill, although some substantial amounts of money are being poured into it. Senator Mines raised some questions about the creation of a new financial instrument, this bonding. I'm going to listen, and I've been told that there will be some narrowing language. But even though I'm under the balcony doing some work, I have my eyes on you, my ears attuned to you, and if I have any questions, I'll ask them. But as everybody else has said, something needs to be done. I don't know if in its present form this bill is the best thing, but it's the best thing at this point and will be a good basis for starting. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you,
You can hold your applause.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Mines, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Madam President, members, and Senator Chambers. Thank you for the segue. I did, just to recap this morning, I brought on Mike just.
Senator Chambers, you are recognized.
Thank you. general friend. Members of the legislature, I'd like to ask Senator Heidemann a couple of questions if he is available.
Senator Heidemann, are you available to answer a question from Senator Chambers right now?
Yes, right now.
Senator Heidemann, you had mentioned that if a certain set of circumstances arose and a district were required to pay back some funds that it had received, do you recall discussing something like that?
Yes.
How would they, where would they get the money with which to pay back that which would be required to be paid back?
You're very alert. I will say that. I have probably come to the same conclusion that you have. It's going to come from property tax, I would have to think.
I can't think of any other place that it could come unless they would try to raid the general fund, which is not likely to happen. Would you agree?
Well, it would have to come from the local NRD. It would have to come from the local side because they couldn't raid the general fund at that time.
Exactly. So has this aspect been discussed with the people who've agreed to whatever this component would be referred to as? Do they realize that if this district had to return this money, they would probably see their property taxes increase in order to provide that money? Had that issue even been raised?
I've been informed, yes.
And what was the conclusion if one was reached? You guys are going to have to work out some hand signals, but that's okay. I don't use the computer. I'm old school when it comes to that, so I ought to let ordinary communications be the ticket here.
I think it appears that the local NRDs want to be in compliance, and they do at their utmost to be in compliance. And if not, I suppose they would realize that they would be obligated. I think this bill also gives them the authority to increase their property tax the way it is now, and also agrees that to put a fee on irrigated acres, and they could probably, within the means that we are giving them within this bill, have the means to repay this money.
Okay, the NRD people know that, but do the citizens whose taxes will be increased, do you think they know that? This is something like that bill we had the other day on liability, where the political subdivisions were taken into consideration, but not the children who might be hurt. So the leaders of the NRDs may have agreed, but the people whose property will be taxed may not have been informed. Were there meetings that informed the people that this could very well happen, the increase of their property taxes? I'm just asking.
There have been hearings and probably what they have read through the press.
Okay. I hadn't read anything about this in the press, so I guess I know a little bit more than what I read in the newspaper. But here's something else I would ask you. The corn checkoff that you mentioned is how much right now?
7/8 cents per bushel.
And how long has that been in place, if you know? What do you think the price of corn per bushel was at the time that was put in place? We know it was not $4 a bushel, don't we?
Correct.
So percentage-wise, that amount today is a lot smaller than it was at the time that it was first put per bushel, when the per bushel value of corn was a lot less. What would it have to be today at $4 a bushel to be the same, the equivalent amount?
I'd have to research some history there to find out when the corn checkoff actually started. It increased, I think, 2 years ago to 7/8 cents, but the corn checkoff has been going since, I think, the mid-'90s, and that's just my memory.
But we know that the reason corn is increasing is because it's being used for ethanol. And as corn is being used for ethanol and the price of corn is increasing, other grain farmers are now starting to produce corn because they want to get on that wagon. Would you agree?
There is an increase or intention to increase planted acres of corn this year.
Now, would you be willing, and we probably will run out of time before you can answer.
Time.
I knew it.
Members of the legislature, Senator Carlson, Senator Chambers, you're next.
Thank you,
to be
Mr.
recognized.
President.
You're
Senator
welcome.
Carlson, I'd like to ask you a question. Senator Carlson, you had said...
Senator Carlson, will you yield?
Yes.
Senator Carlson, in response to a question that Senator Mines asked you about some figures, you said they're in there because of bonding requirements, and you'd hope that those levels would never have to be reached.
I certainly do.
Okay, so right now, since they're just theoretical, they're bonding, but if they had to be reached, they'd be more like bondage, right?
I agree with you. That's what it would be.
Now, you said something must be done, and I believe all of us here today agree with it. If pumping were reduced, that would help us reach a solution, wouldn't it? Whether people like it or not.
Yes, it would.
Why don't we consider that?
We are.
And to what extent will that be considered?
I can't answer that because I'm not in on that particular part of the equation and the determination, but that is definitely a part of it. And everybody hurts through this.
Okay, and that's all I'll ask you. I want to get back to asking Senator Heidemann a question or two.
Senator Heidemann, will you yield?
And Senator Heidemann, as you come to the mic, I just want to say a couple of things. Senator Shimmick grew up on the Republican River. Senator Shimmick watched the Republican River flood. Senator Shimmick watched reservoirs built on the Republican River. Senator Shimmick watched great recreational areas develop around the Republican River. That's why she's a Democrat. Senator Heidemann, I'd like to ask you a question now.
Senator Heidemann, will you yield?
Yes.
Senator Heidemann, although I'm not going to hold you to an amount that 7/8 of a cent would be based on a $4 per bushel corn price, it would be more than 7/8 of a cent, right?
It depends on where you started from. I understand that this corn checkoff was started in the mid-1990s, and if my memory goes back that far, the price of corn probably back at that time was looking at $3.50 and $4. There was a short rise in prices, and then when we hit, I'd say 2000, late 1990s to 2000, it dropped back down. So probably when it was started, you're looking at it would be fairly level to where you're at right now.
But most of the period between when it started and today, the price was considerably lower than $4 a bushel. Would you agree?
Yes.
But even when the price dropped from what you said that it was when this checkoff was first put in place, even before the price dropped, even after the price dropped, that 7/8 of a cent was maintained once it was put in place.
It's a little bit like gas tax. Even though gas has gone up $3, you're still paying 27.1 cents.
Would you be against raising the checkoff amount to 3 cents?
Yes.
Why? We want to solve this problem. Isn't there a relationship between a corn checkoff and the problem we're trying to solve? Isn't there a relationship? Are people who grow corn people who also help produce this problem that we're trying to solve?
They are, and they have stepped up to the plate by half a cent.
You ain't going beyond the question. Do people who smoke cigarettes have any responsibility for this problem by virtue of their smoking cigarettes? No. The answer is no. That was a trick question. I shouldn't have thrown it at you. That's all I'll ask you. Thank you, Senator Heidemann. Members of the legislature, the other day when I was speaking against LB 305, and I'm still against it, you'd raid the general fund, put some money in the highway trust fund. Senator Carlson asked me, isn't there a relationship between the sales tax on vehicles since they do use the highways? And I agreed. There is no relationship whatsoever between the cigarette tax and this water problem. So if that is going to be the basis for showing a justification for a course of action, you've just wiped out the basis for increasing the cigarette tax to do anything about this water, unless you're going to say if a cigarette caused a fire, then water would be used to put it out. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm aware that this amount will bring in more than what may be needed for the culprits to pay the full share that they owe. So I want somebody to tell me how much they're willing to add. Silent night. That's the way it always is. But before this amendment, there was a buzz going through the place. There were different little conversations, and everybody was getting along, and it had the appearance of a love fest. This additional penny is not going to put anybody out of business. And if somebody is in that fragile a situation, he or she is not going to make it anyway. If this additional penny will bring in, quote, too much money, unquote, for the purposes envisioned, reduce the amount, but it's got to be more than a half-cent, in my view. Now, you all have enough votes to pass this bill, I'm sure, no matter what happens. There is a lot in this bill that could be not only tinkered with or tweaked, but altered substantially and substantively. There could be an effort to address the concerns expressed by Senator Copeland earlier. There could be an effort to reduce substantially the amount of pumping that is going on. There are large issues that are not being touched by this bill at all. So I offer an amendment dealing with a penny. And you see how the hackles rise? All of a sudden, there's not so much collegiality, is there? And if you talk about the urban areas, that is academic and off somewhere in the future or over the rainbow or beyond the horizon, or as Senator Waldman said, on the other side of the mountain. A penny. Is not the work that was done on this bill worth a penny? Somebody said no. Then we may as well kill the bill. Why have I been told that this bill is so important then? I might just decide how important it is. Do you realize how many amendments can be offered on this bill? And I don't mean frivolous amendments. This one is not frivolous. It's not liked by some people. But it's far from frivolous. It is as serious as anything in this bill. And it has caught more people's attention than anything in this bill. Everything was supposed to have been worked out. But when not everybody who has an interest is at the table, then somebody might come up and raise an issue that is going to make people uncomfortable. But this is the place for the discomfort to manifest itself. Senator Stootman was speaking, and I didn't get to hear everything he said, but he had told me earlier that he's against the checkoff. I guess he means period. Having been on the Agriculture Committee, I know there are people who fought against a mandatory checkoff in various areas forever. But the checkoff is there. It's supposed to promote certain crops. The money goes to an outfit not in this state, and decisions are made there.
1 minute.
So some people did not want their money to go in that direction, but the checkoff remains. A penny, if that's too much, tell me what is not. And if nothing is the only alternative, then Senator Stootman will be here a long time with me, I'm sure. He's nodding yes. I'm sure Senator Carlson is prepared to stay as long as I'm prepared to stay. Well, he's not committal. He sat like a stone, didn't move at all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Discussion continues on FA 65 to the second division of the committee amendments. Senator Dirks, you're next, and you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the legislature. I've heard lots of reminiscings here, and I wanted to visit with Senator Chambers a moment, if he would, please.
Senator Chambers, will you yield to a question from Senator Dirks?
Yes, I will. If he wants to switch it from 1.5 cents to 0.5%, as is done with soybeans, I'll answer your question, Senator Dirks, if I'm able.
Senator Chambers, I'm asking the questions.
Yes.
Okay. I see by this handout that Senator Heidemann gave us that we're taking money from the general fund transfer, from the grain checkoff, and from environmental trust grant, and could also increase the property tax asking for NRDs. And I have to tell you, the rest of the body, that I appreciate the work that you've gone through to get to this point, because I know it's a difficult procedure. The question I wanted to ask Senator Chambers, you were here during the 775 wars, and so we are giving away tremendous tax breaks to corporate America, corporate Nebraska.
True.
And yet we are turning around and taxing our own citizens more to take care of our problems. Can you think of a solution in the way of saving some of those tax dollars that go to corporate Nebraska that could be utilized in this effort?
Any of those breaks that are pursuant to contractual arrangements cannot be touched. They're saved. The only way that amount of break will not be extended is if the corporations fall down on their end. If their employment roles fall drastically, if they don't hold up their end, then they're not going to get the breaks. Other than that, there is no way to touch it.
So they've got that pretty well locked in, haven't they?
Lock, stock, and barrelhead, right. They had good lawyers, they had good lobbyists, and they had supine, sycophantic senators who went along with selling out.
I recall that. There were 9, I think, in opposition on the final vote.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to address some questions to Senator Chambers.
Senator Chambers, are you available to answer a question?
I have to leave a high-level conference, but I'm willing to do it for Senator Carlson.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Your amendment would raise an additional $12 million to go along with the 6 originally planned for, and that would be a little bit over $18 million. That money would go to the problem in the Republican Basin to help solve the compliance with Kansas. Do you agree with that?
If it were raised, yes.
Yes. And that would be an immediate tax shift.
Excuse me, Senator Heidemann. Senator Chambers, will you yield?
Yes.
You want to increase it to 1.5 cents. My question to you, you would be then raising from $6.2 or almost $6.3 million a year to almost, just in my head, figuring $19 million. What is your intent to use that money for?
Well, if the state can't think of anything to do with it, I'll take it and find plenty of things to use it for. But in reality, I know that the body is going to vote to increase that 0.5 cent to 1.5. But we're starting to which would not have been the case. If that amount of money was made, then it means that money coming from other sources will not have to come from those other sources, whatever they are. But I don't expect the full 1.5 cents to go. By that I meant move, and although if I was really hard-nosed, I think I could probably extort it.
Without the passage of LB 701, what the checkoff will be in the year 2012 and beyond?
7/8 of a cent.
It will be.
After 2019, there'll be no checkoff at all?
No, in the year 2013, it'll be nothing. And I'm just going to. I just wanted
2013, the year 2213.
2013, and I just wanted to point that out to you that we came to the table with 0.5 cent, because at that time there would be no checkoff to support either ethanol or anything else. And I want to point out to you that we came to the table with 0.5 cent.
Yeah, and you tempted me and showed me that it's an opportunity to get more.
You lead to me to believe then that we shouldn't have put it in the bill, that there was been nothing, and you would have tried for a half a cent then.
Well, we don't know what would have happened had that contingency arisen. What I have to deal with as a pragmatic politician is the reality placed before me. And you placed before me a half cent between 2012 and 2019, a 7-year period. So
Senator Flood, for what purpose do you rise?
Call the House. I call the House, Mr. President.
There has been a request for a call of the House. Record, please, Mr. Clerk.
26 ayes, 7 nays to cease debate, Mr. President.
Debate does cease. Senator Chambers, you are recognized to close on FA 65.
thank you. Mr. President, members of the legislature, there was no need to call the question on my amendment. I'm going to offer a very similar one tomorrow. Some of us were working on reaching an accord. I don't know with whom Senator Burling is working, but if this is the way the work is done, all bets are off as far as I'm concerned. He can call the question, and he's going to have the opportunity to call the question a lot of times tomorrow, because now I'm in a different mood from the one I was in earlier. I offered an amendment which from me was in good faith. I had offered to cut the amount of the increase in the checkoff substantially. I was working with Senator Langemeyer, Senator Flood, others who may have had an interest. Senator Burling woke up and looked at the clock and said, "Mike, we got to get out of here. I want to call." I didn't even know what he said. I said, "What did he say?" Somebody said he must have called the question. Well, like I say, designate him the question caller tomorrow, unless some people between now and then can explain to me what is going on. I'm not going to have the ground cut from under me. This bill, it doesn't mean anything to me. You all are the ones who want it, so you are going to create a problem for your bill. Was Senator Burling trying to teach me a lesson? Did somebody tell him to do this and teach me a lesson? If they did, then Pinocchio ought to run the legislature, because it's a puppet legislature. I don't know how late we're going to go tonight. Who said we're leaving at 5 o'clock or somewhere thereabouts? Maybe we'll be here till 8 o'clock. Maybe the speaker will decide to teach me a lesson by making me stay here to see how much time I can speak on this bill. It is a fertile field for substantive amendments. But I had said, if we reach an accord on this checkoff, I will talk about the bill, but I don't have any amendments. That has changed. You're going to slap me? And I'm not Martin Luther King, by the way. I don't believe unmerited suffering is redemptive. I don't believe in turning the other cheek unless you hit me so hard that my whole head revolves and spins around and the other cheek is now available for you to slap. But when my head stops spinning, whoever did that, you'd best not be there if I'm still standing. So, some of you all don't think that I can find issues in this amendment to talk about at length. Well, I can, and you all can go to your offices tomorrow and just stay down there and just let me offer my amendment, open, speak twice, and then close. How long can I do that in a day if nobody would help me? If nobody would speak except me? That's when you can put me to the test to see if on my own I can last as long as I said I can. And I'm up to the challenge, I believe. But the fact that I believe it doesn't make it so. Why am I not commenting on my amendment? Because it's not going to be adopted. And you think that is in any way going to deter me? not in the least. If Senator Stootman votes against my amendment, am I surprised? No, he said he's against the checkoff. There are other senators who don't like the checkoff, period. But we were not discussing the checkoff in a vacuum. We were not discussing a cent and a half. We were discussing what amounts to a weighing. I asked, is the bill worth a penny? And some said no. Well, apparently, it's not worth 2/10 of a penny. But I'm going to see how long you all want to go before you come to your senses. I've lost mine now. You're dealing with a man totally devoid of rationality. So you can't talk to me. You're going to have to show me something that I can understand. Thank you, Mr. President. And I will accept a roll call vote since we're under call and everybody should be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Members of the legislature, you've heard the closing on FA 65 to this division of the committee amendments. Mr. Clerk, there has been a request for a roll call vote in regular order, I believe.
Vote is 0 ayes, 30 nays on the adoption of the amendment to the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment is not successful.